So today is September the 20th, and we have a couple of topics to discuss from last week. So a couple of action items from last week. So we will be discussing that today on the call as well. And like all our meetings, Layer 5 community meetings, this meeting is also recorded, and this video will be published on to YouTube. With that said, let's jump into topics. And Lee, would you like to talk about Garrett's question?
Yeah, first I'll just say, Gareth, it's very good of you to jump in. It's a great question. You are in good company. All of us are in a learning mode. I'm here as well. So yeah. So thanks for providing some good learning content for us. So I think there's a couple of things that we'll be able to speak to with standing on confident ground. And then there's some other things where we'll probably find some volunteers on the call to do a bit of research, because in part the questions that you're asking are just like good fodder and for us to good justification to go off and learn some things. There's a couple. If I may try to break down the question maybe into a couple different things. So one is at the very end of this, there's I don't know that the last portion of your investigation, the last portion of your line of thought is so much about literally the proxy or the filters themselves. And actually you can clarify this, but if it's about them caching the requests, like caching that particular user's token or caching that particular sessions token, as much as the caching here is more about stuffing that JWT full of some additional info such that it itself behaves as something of a cache, and it sort of carries its cache around as each microservice were to interact with a request that has that JOT associated. The info is present already, and so there's sort of an implicit cache happening there. Can you?
Yeah. So I can. I'm apologizing again, but I can read from the customer's kind of requirement. Would be so. They said the enrichment of the JWT in their case would be calling an internal service with the OAuth 2 UUID and receiving user group permission data back, which would be cached for the lifetime of the session and invalidated on updates. So I think it's rather than then going back to this internal service every time, there's potentially some caching there for the lifetime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which actually sounds a little bit easier to achieve, or rather something that for my part, I'm a bit more familiar with than sort of generic caching of HTTP requests. And so anyway, so the good news here is, yeah, there was another, and there still is another user in the community. I don't know if Samir is on today. If he is, we'll pick on him. If not, it's not as fun to pick on him, but we will anyway. And so Samir had come with really a fairly similar request. In this case, basically his request was to be able to take a JOT, take a token and manipulate it, like based on some info that's inside of it, go ahead and extract some info out and then shove some info back in. And so a very similar pattern. In his case, it wasn't about literally shoving in like a role along with specific permissions that role or that user might have, but in the end, it ends up being but that's neither here nor there in some respects, because that identity system or that authorization system, when it hands back that info, yeah, or rather, I'm being long-winded. I guess the first part of this is, yeah, that sounds entirely feasible. Like that sounds like some a bit of work that the community just ended up doing recently, and tried to make this particular filter configurable. Like that was part of the point, was that like, hey, while Samir's use case was, while we were trying to facilitate that and achieve it, we're trying to also make it generic, because it's, it's not, in some respects you could sort of compare the concept of baggage with distributed tracing as kind of a similar thing, that like you want to take a bit of info, put it and propagate it across each of these requests. And there's, and one of those ways, one of those ways is you got that token sitting right there. It's capable of holding things. Like, great. As a matter of fact, the tool that we talk about in this call a lot is Meshery. And for Meshery itself, like the way that it would have its own user permissions, it's the set of contributors is desirous of Meshery operating in something of a similar fashion, so that it can be somewhat dynamic, so that the code can just respond to who it is that's making the request, and they see the appropriate buttons, or that they see the appropriate things to interact with or not, based on the permissions in there. So yes is the answer to your first question. Like, yes, and there's a sample token to look at its behavior and see how closely it fits with the use case that's being described. The caching portion that I was doing a bad job of like trying to clarify was I think you were just reaffirming that, like, yeah, hey, we're not talking about each, or not necessarily, maybe that ends up being the case, but to start with, it wasn't like the customer was describing each individual, like if you have if they have 10 services and 10 sidecar proxies, that each proxy needed to literally hold a cache of like what that authorization information was for each individual unique user request, because that same user would have the same permissions across it wasn't like that needed to be cached inside of the filter itself, inside of the proxy itself, but rather it sounded like the caching in this case was, once the token has interfaced with that sort of central authorization microservice, it was like, hey, okay, great, here's the info that all of the rest of the upstream services that you might interact with, here's your key, here's your keychain, like here's your set of permissions, you just take that with you. And then that way those microservices don't have to come back and hammer on what will become a bottleneck in the system eventually, this central auth service, which is also just kind of inefficient and like, totally, like that's no doubt there's some devil in the details of some of this, but that's, and anyone else on the call that was working on the JWT 9000, the Transformer 9000 is what they ended up calling it. Does anyone want to point out where I'm overlooking an aspect of what Gareth is describing, and that like this filter like is ill positioned to handle his use case? Because Gareth, our goal, like Gareth, we're in need of these kinds of use cases. We're just looking for stuff to work on, more or less. So, while everyone else thinks about how they're going to correct me here in a moment, I'll say this, Gareth, to kind of introduce you to why it is that we're having this call, and kind of the other things that we do is that, so I think that there's a ton of power in the intelligence of the network. Like if you've got a fine-grained control, this layer 7 control over requests that are going by, and you're able to dynamically load filters like the one that we're talking about that will do a special function for you, a network function, so to speak, that, well, great. Like, so we're trying to enhance a relatively recent CNCF project Meshery as it's a service mesh manager, and some of the contributors on the call are going to talk about how Meshery in its next release, like it will go to this repository, which has this filter plus a couple of other filters, and it will import those filters and make them available to people who are running Meshery, so that then eventually you can tell Meshery things like, hey, I'm running a collection of 20 microservices. Here's the 10 that should get this JOT transformer filter. Here's the 10 that should get the, I don't know, get the other, the whatever, or get no filter or whatever. Or maybe there's a chain of 2 filters, like it needs to get the JOT transformer filter, but also this subsequent one that it should pass through. And those are the kinds of use cases that Meshery is chasing after. And so,
okay.
So yeah,
that makes sense.
So back to other folks on the call, did I misrepresent anything, I guess? It's like take your pot shot. It's like a free. It's like, yeah, I don't know that. I mean, so you know, we're all still collectively learning. So some of us are hesitant to point out where I'm wrong on a call, maybe. But to my knowledge, like nope, like you just re-described the same use case that we were trying to make that transformer generically capable of. I think if for nothing else, my sense is that after your time here, you'll step back from me like, hey, yeah, my intuition was correct. Like these are the types of capabilities that are also, you know, well aligned for. These are also service mesh use cases, and so as you double click into that, the community ended up writing this particular JWT manipulator for that use case. I guess what I'm saying is, like, if this doesn't work for the use case that as you collect more details or as you sort of explore it more, we're really happy to try to change this or make a new one, make a copy of this one, make a new one to try to get that to work. It gives everybody a good excuse to go. Like the goal, part of the goal here is that we want for, we want for it to be really configurable, because even if someone has a very similar use case, like, oh, they didn't call their permission, the keychain that they wanted to pass along, it wasn't in JSON, it was some hashed thing, or like the use cases will be very similar but be nuanced. And so what we want for is like for someone to be able to go into Meshery and then say, oh, actually, here's the string that the filter needs to look for when it sees that string. Maybe it's like user account or something, like replace it with something else from a different portion of the HTTP transaction, or
yeah.
So we desire for it to be configurable.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so what other aspects of what Gareth said are worth exploring? So Gareth, you're right on the cusp of like you can manually, you can, well, maybe this is actually, maybe I won't steal the thunder of others that are going to give update on the call, but I think based on some other updates that are going to happen on this call, that you'll get a sense of how ready Meshery is for you to take it and just go try to see if that filter would meet your use case.
Great.
Nice, good, okay. So now we put Gareth in the hotspot. Like, does anyone else? So, like Ashish, I don't know if you want to speak to it. Like maybe we'll bump up your update. Talk about how the JWT transformer is being registered and if it's ready for use. Ashish, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Cool. Now, and then, yeah. Okay. Ashish has got problems with his audio. So, okay. Maybe we'll, Navin, you can maybe go back.
Maybe we can come back to Ashish later. Meghna, would you like to talk about your topic?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the first one, to give some context to people who are not familiar with this, the first issue that I'm talking about is fixing the URL import. So recently we added the feature called we can import patterns, filters, and even applications using URL. So we can get the data, we can upload the data using that URL. So initial PR that was added to add this feature was not functioning properly. So I think Michael corrected it for applications, and I'm working on the patterns and the filters part of it. So yeah, in the PR, so I did a similar approach that I think I'm hoping it's Michael. So I did the same thing that he has done, but the thing is, the samples that I have for patterns and filters are a little different. So if you can scroll up a bit, once, to the, yeah. So for the pattern sample, yeah, it is just it just opens to a complete data. The data is shown like this, but for the filters one, what happens is that it triggers a download. So I'm not sure how to handle it. So currently, if that filters part is not working, so I added for the patterns is working fine. So I only checked it with the two samples that I have. That is one thing, and there are some checks failing there, so I need some help with that too. So that's pretty much it for that issue.
Yeah, feedback from Meghna.
I mean, like I can speak for the filters. Like, so for now, I think you can try the all the CRUD operations with a pattern file, a YAML file. As we update the filters UI to function differently, we can make changes. So maybe you can uh, try the filters with the same pattern find as well. That should work now.
Okay. Okay. Sure. I'll check that then. And about the check spelling, I need some help with that too. So the PR is added in the docs.
Anyone has immediate feedback on like why the checks might be failing?
Yeah,
There are a couple. Okay.
yeah. This was an issue over the weekend. Actually, for whatever reason, the GitHub action that's being used to set up Golang is not configured to use or is not using Go 1.16, and so so that just needs an update. Like, and when was this PR opened? Oh, 6 hours ago. Okay, so okay.
Yeah, all PRs today are failing 3 tests, I guess.
Yeah, because it looked like the error in there was saying that there's a particular module that needed Go 1.16. And the thing is that that environment should be running Go 1.16. So it's more of just an update in the workflow itself that needs to make sure the actions set up Go using the right version. Cool.
Okay. Another one is, do you mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Talk about that. Give me a second. I hope you're able to see the screen.
Yes.
So the second issue is that so once we open yeah, so once we try to delete items or anything, for example, then we get a prompt which says like yes and no thing. Right now, both of them have the same kind of buttons, and we suggested that it will be better for the UX if we make the yes in the background color and no as the one like transparent background, which won't, it's rarely used. So we keep it transparent. So for that, the thing is the component we are currently using for the prompt has something like, one second. So what it takes is, it takes options as the prop and rest the title and everything, but this is an important part. So it takes all options and then it goes through all the options and creates a button. And for each button, it's the same button that's being used for everything. And this particular component is used in a lot of places. I didn't go through all of them. The thing is, if if we want one as the most primary button as the background one, what we can do is like we only go through the first n-1 ones, and then for the last one we can just make it as a background as a dark one or something like that. That is one thing. Or if we are generally only having two options, we're just using two options for all, then we can just remove this and just use it as a 2-1. That is the thing. I didn't edit anything right now because of the component, how it's built right now. So I just want some input on that. How do you think I should proceed for this? So here, yeah. So it's taking options like this, yes and no, and it just creates buttons for each of the options.
Right. Yeah. Meghana, do you know, or is there any use of that component that offers the user more than two choices?
I'm not sure actually. Like it's used in different places, so I'm not sure how it's being used in that different ones.
So
So
as far
that's
as I
why.
know, it's only yes and no for now. Like everywhere, we have used that component, I think, at 4 places. One is application, filters, patterns, and performance. It all has the yes and no option. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, in addition to that, in addition to that, what Aditya said, in patterns, applications, and filters, we are using that, but we are passing the array values as of options in filters and applications and all everywhere, and we are configuring the yes and no option by conditions. So that thing can be, I think, changed in the model itself. But
Okay.
yeah, as Meghna said that it is using a single component for a button. So yeah, that thing is quite tricky to have a change in primary and secondary button.
Okay. So just to brief it again, so you want me to change the component itself to accepting, like, I mean, it has as if it's only getting two inputs and options, right? So that's what.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll change it there itself and take two inputs maybe for the primary button and the secondary button.
Sure.
Okay. That's pretty much it from my side. I think I've covered both the topics.
Nice, Meghana, that's great. By the way, just as a relevant example or relevant topic, so of the prompt that you were talking about, that where the user needs to choose yes or no, and how you're looking at making the sort of the, I don't know if you'd call it the default, but the primary choice. Like if they chose to delete something from the UI, then they probably meant to do that, but we're prompting them just to make sure that it isn't a mistake. And so that's good. So probably they're going to answer yes. And so if we move yes, but just like, I'm just kind of repeating some of the stuff you just said, but if we move yes to the right-hand side, sort of like this is set up here, that there would be a no and a yes, and they would be styled in a similar, similar to this. I was bringing this up to give an example of, I don't think that the prompt confirmation component is being used here, but I just bring it up as an example of where a tertiary selection is being offered to the user. So the user's setting up mesh tree, they're walking through the connection wizard, they get to the adapters. It might be just fine, they can continue, but it might also be that they had like advanced things that they wanted to do. So that was the third option. Look at that, the Nginx adapter is working, that's great. Cool, anyway, just an example for you, so. Nice. By the way, I think just to help with consistency, this would be my fault, and I've probably been fickle on this, but if you don't mind capitalizing the yes and the no, I guess we capitalize in the other areas. So that's my fault. I think Gaurav had it correct, and I
as you've mentioned right now that like there's a tertiary option in that example that you've just shown. So will it be okay if I just change the component itself to, accepting only two options?
Yeah. Yep.
Sure, I'll do that. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Meghna. For the next topic, we have Ashish. Ashish, I hope your audio issues. Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, so my topic is order registration. Okay, so we had already done the registration of seed content for patterns and filters. The applications is left. Rudraksh has an open PR where he has seeded the, because in the case of applications, there would be different applications for different service meshes. So this recent PR that that Rudraksh has made, we have these book info, HTTP bin, and emoji Voto applications. These three are Istio specific applications. So we would have a pattern file for these three applications, and it would be seeded inside the Istio adapter. And similarly, each adapter would have its own application. And what we are hoping is after this PR gets merged and after some changes in the mesh kit, at the runtime when the adapter starts, what it does is it registers its capabilities with the mesh server. And while it does that, it will also register these applications with the mesh server. Right now, there is no endpoint, I think, in the mesh server for that, if I'm not wrong. Or we can use the existing endpoint. Okay, we can use the existing endpoint, or if you want to avoid all that token thing, then we can create a new endpoint. That is a topic of discussion. So that endpoint would just take these applications, and depending, and it would figure out that, okay, so adapters have sent these applications and I need to seed them, and then the mesh server would seed those applications inside of the database. And then when you will log in with the local provider, you will be able to see applications as well, along with filters and patterns. So so this is where we are right now with this thing.
Cool. Does that make sense to everybody else? That the adapters are vessels. They're packaging mechanisms for service mesh specific functionality. That each one, while they're similar and they share a lot of common functions, that each one packages up things that are specific to that mesh, and that they would continue. And so today they package up sample applications. Now, here's the thing where this changes. Excuse me, where this changes a little bit is that today, if you take the Linkerd adapter, it'll probably have the emoji Voto app, because that's the Linkerd sample app. It'll probably have the Istio book info app, because that's another prominent sample app, so that you can try that sample app on Linkerd. And it'll probably have HTTP bin. Oh yeah, actually you've got the 3 listed right there. So good. Now, if you take the Linkerd, if you take the console adapter, it probably has those same 3 or 4 and the same 3 or 4. And so actually we're being repetitive across them. And that's, intentional because maybe someone is just using one adapter. So, and if that adapter doesn't come with any sample apps, then the user doesn't get any test apps, sample apps. Okay, okay. So how do we give the users, how do we make sure they get applications to play with, but also try to avoid repeating the same application 7 times? And that was one of those things where I didn't really have it wasn't a rhetorical question, or it wasn't like, okay, so a couple of ways to achieve that. It's like, well, look, it's still going to be the case that people can optionally choose to load up just, 1 adapter or 2 adapters, whatever. So they can, okay. All right. So if we deduplicate the apps from each adapter, then if someone only loads up 1 adapter, they're not going to get all the sample apps. Okay, fine. So should we centrally load all of the applications and treat those as a mesh server, like a central resource? That's one solution. Another solution would be, well, continue to package the sample applications inside of each adapter, but provide them with a unique identifier such that if that content has already been registered and another adapter goes to register the same content, the same app, hey, don't, ignore or give the user some choice, but maybe by default, ignore it or something like that.
The second choice looks better to me. Good. If anyone has any other.
Yeah. Yep.
So if, yeah, good.
No.
Yeah, actually, if patterns and filters are being centrally seeded in server, then why applications would so either the concern could have been that what if a certain component of pattern doesn't exist, then how would we know? But if patterns are being centrally seeded, and if that concern, basically, if we are not dealing with that particular concern with patterns or with filters, then applications are sort of similar construct. So definitely, if we seed it centrally, that is, if it's only available to server, there is a concern that what if a component of pattern is a component of application is absent from the store, from the registry. But the same thing actually happens with patterns. And if we do this, that is, we actually load applications centrally. They are in Meshi server, then we avoid duplication, because Meshi server is anyhow, definitely it could be a bad user experience, that is you applied on our applications, and Meshi server is telling you that you cannot do that because one of this component is not present, but it won't mess up with the infrastructure because Meshi server will take care of identifying that this particular component is actually absent. So we get back to the same concern. We don't get to know in advance, we list them out, but if the user has all the components, it works. Or else Meshi server will let them know that, no, this won't work.
I agree with you there. And the only concern that you told, that was my only concern. So if the user has been shown that these are the available applications and he clicks on them, and of course, if the adapter isn't there to handle that, so it would be a bad user experience. But again, now I'm quite confused.
You get, yep. I think that.
So actually, even I think we can deal with that also. Just that we will have to build some more stuff in Meshi server. That is, Meshi server always knows what is present and what is not. If it has the list of the application, it can quickly pass through. Okay, this application needs all these components. Let me look at the registry. Okay, I don't have this particular component in my registry that belongs to this application. Reject it. Don't show it to the user. So we can build on top of it if we need to. Which will avoid duplication as well as, and it's not like we won't have to build stuff with with seeding applications or anything into the adapters, because right now I don't think there is any mechanism through which adapters can convey that, hey, seed these items into your registry or something. So if we have to build stuff, then we can probably build in mesh server to avoid duplication all, while getting rid of the duplication that we have, at least right now.
The logic that you said that, okay, so check if, I mean, all of the logic that you said, it would take place at when the mesh server would start, right? That do I need to show the users these applications?
We can actually just do it when probably user loads up that page. So are we going to process it every time? So not the most efficient thing. We can maybe cache it, but caching comes with its own issues. So either we can do it every time the user sends the page that, okay, load these things up, load my seeded patterns. So we can do at that time, maybe every time that the user does, or maybe some caching in there also. So yeah, definitely not when the server boots up, because at that time, even server doesn't know what components can come in.
Yeah, the thing is Mesher is going to have to deal with both, with content coming from both places anyway, or even if content was never came from an adapter, as we're describing, it would still have to deal with the concern where a user brings their own app, and it turns out their app is incompatible with Meshre's capabilities, whether it's Meshre server's capabilities or the adapter's capabilities. Like Meshre already has to be concerned with that and make sure that the user has a decent experience. They don't try to do something that doesn't work. We're also, you know, like, and again, like even if if you take a different use case, you say, hey, I wrote a JWT transformer filter, like the one that we were just talking about. It's at version 1. It's doing certain things. Gareth provided some feedback. Let's release a 1.5. Great. Let me go load up that 1.5 into my Meshre system that already has my 1.0. Wait, what should Meshre do? Should it overwrite? Should it version? So Meshre also already has the challenge of content management, content versioning. There's a lot about content management that concerns that come in. And so whether it's an adapter that's registering content, or it's a user that's doing it subsequently, or if Meshre server, as part of its initialization routine, is self-registering some things, like it doesn't really matter what vector you come from. It's like you've got that concern about what do you want to do about duplication? Do you want to, and what do you want that default behavior to be, and how do you want the user to have choice and control over that? So yeah, both concerns come into light.
But there is still sort of a difference. That is, the components that either Meshre registers or adapter registers, they are actually pattern components, while these are complete pattern files. What we can do is, I mean, I'm not sure if we should be doing this, but what we can do is we can have a component type called book info. Not the best solution with book info.st or something. And this is now a component type. So this is a workload definition basically. When and it registers it, we have the rest can be taken care by the same workflow. That is, you say I need a book info.st or something, and then it goes through the same thing, and Meshre server can quickly check, okay, this thing is available to me, and this was registered by st adapter. We can do that, but the thing is that there are two distinct sort of registration. The only registration that we have right now is the registration of components that can come from any direction. While this is a pattern or application, because this only sort of contains only applications. So that's the reason I was suggesting that if we can, let's centralize, because we have all of the mechanism in Meshre server to check stuff. So we also have now sort of stages. We can even do verification. Like we don't have to deploy the entire thing just to check if that thing is valid or not. Just add 2 stages, identify, verify, get back the result. So yeah, this is that we have a lot of mechanisms built into Meshre server, which can take care of all most of the concerns that probably we will have.
Nice. It's probably worthwhile, for as much as I would like for us to make a decision and move forward briskly, it's probably worthwhile to write down a couple of the considerations, because it gets a little involved. If you supplant the use case not with a well-known sample app, but with some user's random application, that might be or anyway, that's a use case to walk through and understand, like, how it gets, thank you, Magna, how it gets validated, verified. If we don't register, so I'm not arguing one way or the next in terms of like, hey, where should these be sourced from? Like, when you look at the WebAssembly filters, there's some amount of sustaining and maintaining that goes on the WASM filters repo. We should curate those and make sure that they work for, at least for Envoy-based data planes. So therein, they actually have the same challenge already, that they've got to, or that as they get registered, they should only be applied to Envoy-based service mesh data planes. That, anyway, my point being is that as the sample apps are sustained over time, and as they potentially version based on enhancements and changes to their respective service mesh, it's like, okay, are we dynamically sourcing those, or are we centralizing the where they get stored somewhere centrally and managing them there, and then, and so. But anyway, I'm not arguing one way or the next. All I'm saying is we should go write down like a few of these use cases, because it'll help illuminate the challenges that we face. And in some respects, I kind of consider that what I was saying before continues to be true, that irrespective of whether or not an application is seeded from an adapter, from a user, centrally in Mesh Server, it's like all the same concerns continue to be there about deduplicating and confirming that these things that we should actually let a user try to provision one. So Ashish, perhaps like by Wednesday or before Wednesday, if you can articulate, and it can just be very brief, just bullets of like what the use cases are. User brings their own, adapter brings one, Mesh Server brings one, centrally stored, the thing gets versioned over time, that sample app, the user tries to load up multiple of the same one, like, just like, as you bullet those out, it'll become a little more evident. And I don't know that there is a wrong answer to to where they get sourced from. So. Cool. Anyway, anyone else have any thoughts on that one? Okay, does anyone know, are we dynamically sourcing the sample apps today? Or are those manually packaged in the adapters? Yeah. So, to the extent that they're manually packaged, part of what Utkarsh is saying is like, there's some there's sustaining energy that goes into manually curating those sample apps in each adapter. So cool. It's a good topic. Gaurav, you're up.
Yes. Let me share this. Yeah, so the current issue is about having multiple import options for pattern filters and apps. So previously what we were having in the UI is an upload button and a URL uploader, plus now we will be having a GitHub upload button plus another option for upload, that is okay, let me just show this thing first. So what I have done for connecting all the upload items in a single modal, so that we can have an user usability to select what he or she wants to upload from the file. So currently, few of these configurations are not working because I had some issues with the Material UI version 4 and version 5. So I will be configuring this. So the basic idea is the basic idea here is that user can have multiple options in a single model to choose whether he wants to upload locally or from the URL or GitHub or from the cytoscape that we have in future aspects. So yeah, that is the basic UI that we have currently. Plus the thing that basically we want to implement is that the user should be able to upload it from the GitHub repository. For that, we have all the request body and the URLs over here. So I need to configure that accordingly. That thing is not yet configured. So any feedback on the initial content management of the imports?
Anybody have feedback? Is there a what does the subsequent step look like when someone clicks on one of those?
Yep, another model, for example, if we click on a URL, so another model comes up subsequently for that, and we can have certain operations according to that.
You know, it'd be nice, like just in case I messed up, I'm like, oh, I wanted to give a URL. Oh, I don't know. You know what? I actually have it locally. Like, there's no way for me to go back. It might be nice if the same modal stays, but just expands to show subsequent, fields.
Okay, so we're seeing that after having this modal, a back option should be there to go in.
No, modal on modal starts to get a little inception-y or a little.
For that, we can have tabs options. That would work.
A tabbed menu, yeah. Yep, or you can just expand the same. But yeah, I think either of those. Yeah, it's a little like when you have a tabbed menu, people, or at least I know for sure, I feel as if I kind of need to go exploring first and look across the tabs to understand what those choices are about, as opposed to here, it's like, hey, look, it's atomic. You click one of these four, and if when I click one of the four, it just expands down below and says, okay, well, and what's your GitHub URL, or what's your import URL? What's like that?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we can have an expand on modal for that. Not a modal, but an expand on option in this only.
That's cool. Yeah, by the way, so on the GitHub import, this is one of those things where, gosh, yeah, Utkarsh, you might want to give this some thought. I think actually both of those two, the GitHub import and the mesh map button, the cytoscape JSON, I think those are both, this needs to be an extension point where a remote provider's capabilities are displayed. So if you're only using the local provider, I think it's only going to support those top two, the browse file and the HTTP, the URL based upload. Whereas the bottom two, I think, are only provided by the Meshery remote provider. So we would only show those.
Actually, GitHub import is also supported by non-provider, while Cytoscape is also supported by. So all of them is supported by both of the provider. The difference is that in GitHub upload, private repositories and all are supported only, or organization-related uploads are supported only by the Meshery Cloud and not by the non-provider. Although yes, both of them can also be queried by checking the capabilities. So if you would query the capabilities, you would be able to see that are these things basically is these kind of uploads supported by a particular provider or not.
So the capabilities endpoint, Gaurav, are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, the capability endpoint for the GitHub.
Well, or for the provider. So like there's a GET API, there's a REST API in Meshery for the.
Yeah, with different kind of request methods. Is that the same one?
Yeah, more or less that. Yeah, we'll send you a link just to be sure. But so back to Utkarsh's comment that, so Utkarsh, on the Cytoscape JSON or the mesh map import, like while it may be technically true that people could import that in the local provider, I don't know that there's any value to it because they wouldn't persist. They wouldn't be able to. Okay, so there's that. Then on the other GitHub based one is like, is the GitHub import behavior for public repos, is that materially different, the behavior of what Meshery server does than from the, okay, and if it isn't, then it's like, well, look, both of those should, like, while it's technically true that it's supported, it's like we should probably only show those if I guess if the local provider endpoint responds positively, it's still kind of a problem because it's not as much of a problem for the GitHub import. It's just like we're showing two things that do the exact same thing, and so it's not really. Can you, Utkarsh? Can you do me a favor? Can you provide explicit guidance to Gaurav on where the capabilities endpoint is, and then just on how to make sure that if it's the local provider, we're only showing the first two.
Yeah, I'll actually, I'll ping Gaurav on Slack with the details.
Nice.
Okay.
This is great. Anybody else have feedback for Gaurav?
Yep. Thanks, Gaurav. We have one more topic to discuss. Saying, like, do you have an update on updating the filters UI?
Yeah, y'all can hear me, right? I'm gonna assume y'all can hear me. So can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. Is my screen visible?
Not yet. Okay. Yeah. Right. It's visible now.
Okay. So I was actually going through all the codes, and I have identified all the repeating codes. So I just want to confirm some things, and I want to know if I'm understanding what I'm supposed to write. So firstly, okay, I'll start with patterns. So patterns has this workflow. When you click a configuration button, it comes into another space, and we have the form for patterns where we can input fields. I'm so sorry if my there's Docker desktop running, Kubernetes running, Istio running, and WSL all on my Windows, so it might crash anytime. So I don't know. Okay, so this is a workflow for patterns, and filters as doesn't have this workflow yet. So I think I'm supposed to be implementing that to this as well. So right now filters brings up a model like this, and there's just an option for direct edit. And one more thing I noticed is filters has only a delete option here. We don't have an update option here. So I'm not sure, was that a mistake or is it? So I
Yeah,
just
it
want to confirm that.
was intentional.
Okay, it was intention. Okay. Application. Yeah. So applications has a delete button, sorry, update button, but filters on. So I want to just confirm whether that was intentional. Yeah. So this is what get the patterns workflow to filters and applications and centralize the whole repeated components. Anybody?
Wait, Zane, I was so busy taking notes, but the point of what you were showing is that you've now provided the same in-depth configurator interface for filters as was available for patterns?
Yeah, I have not yet, but I want to make sure that's what we are looking forward to. Like, that's what we want.
Yeah, ultimately, like long term, we hope, I would think that there's hope that there will be a more compelling user experience, but short term, that's very much needed. Like right now, people don't, if you want to apply a specific, yeah, I mean, like, I'll just stop there and just say it's very much needed.
Okay.
That's great. And yeah.
It took some time to get my system set up to run Meshi, so I was a bit lagging in this. So, but I'll try to finish by this weekend shortly.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I'd say, man, it's about time. Like, you know, come on. Just kidding. Zane, that's great. Yeah, it's no small thing running all of those systems at once. Nor is it a small thing to come up to fully up to speed on Meshery like you have. So that's really good. It's exciting to see this. I'm gonna borrow the ball for just a moment since we're right at time. I'm gonna say that there's another couple of things that are needed with respect to filters, applications, and patterns. So one of those, and these are great kind of first items actually for people or for well-seasoned contributors, these are still really good items, is if I had named a filter when I first uploaded it, I might want to change the name. So I just want to like rename the display name. I can go in and I can edit the details of the filter. This is great. Now, if I edit, but I don't seem to, I probably can't, what happened to the save button? Uh-oh. We're probably missing a save button, but also I don't know that I can change the name of the filter there. Apps, I got this book info pattern.
Yeah, that's what I asked. Gaurav said it was intentional.
Oh, okay. And he may, okay, so this actually does let you change the, so yeah, going back to that. So Gaurav was saying this is intentional. Yeah, he's right that what was uploaded here is a binary. And so there's a little, so actually this is more to the point of what you're bringing, that like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me just add something here. Like by default, like every filter we upload gets this filter, because like we built this using how patterns were built. So in patterns, it fetches the name from inside the pattern file. But in case of WASM filters, there is no option for that. So we have to like probably add a new, or like fetch the name from the actual filter binary, what the filter name is from the filter binary, or provide an edit option just for the name itself. So it would be different from how patterns and applications handle this. So, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Like
No,
if
yeah.
anyone want to take that up.
So to recap what you just said, we need the ability to rename a filter.
And probably fetch the name from the file that you import or upload.
So there's a difference. So the rename the filter display name, which is just some string that people use to, and the ability to at least to show the file name of the filter. Maybe not rename the file name, but at least show the file name. Does that make sense? Navendi, is that what you're, okay. Nice. Anybody who's interested, just drop your name in for either one of those two. But other than that, Navendu, anything else that we want to cover today?
I had a minor update. So the last thing I worked on was dynamically registering the components. There was a little, I don't know whether to call it a blunder or a mistake. There was a mistake with the filters. So what was happening is all of the OEM schemas were same for all of the pattern components. There was this problem with the filter, and it went unnoticed because nobody reads what's the OEM rep schema, and I didn't too. So I have made the change on my local system. I will create the PR soon, but yeah, I'll have to change the filters. And before doing that, I will also have to make a lot of changes in the mesh kit, because first thing that in the scheme, basically when we are generating components for the Kubernetes, the QOpenAPI JSON schema does not support that referencing thing. Utkarsh can talk more about it. So I have to write a function in Go to actually handle it. So first that needs to be added. Another thing that I missed, and somehow it went, nobody saw it in the PR review also. I have hard coded a lot of things inside the meshkits function, which needed to be there, passed from the config as the cfg.filter.something filter. So two filters, I was not even using them, and it worked because all of the adapters have the same exact template. So it was working, but it just went overlooked. So all of these changes I have made on my local system, and I will be making the PR soon. And in that PR, most probably I'll also handle the Kate's the thing for Kate's components as well. So there would be a PR in meshkit and meshery and all of the adapters changing that particular filter, so that everything can, so that we can have different OEM schemas for particular components. So that's what my update was.
Makes sense. Makes sense. By the way, as we go to close here, I'll just ask if Rulin, Mr. Tang, if you can hear us, or if you might be able to say hi. It's nice to have you on the call. I know it's probably really late your time too. It's very nice to have you. But I just wanted to call out Rulin in case he's still with us. So it's good to have him on the call. Okay. All right. Nice, great call today. So one of the action items for next week is, outside of the ones that are being lined up here, I think there's one more on, well, so the, like following up on, well, like it would be good if someone explained a phantom token. It might be nice for everyone to understand what that is. Also on, like when, as we're looking at configuring filters and applying filters, well, this is a great use case. It's like when you go to apply the JWT manipulator 9000, like that specific filter, it's configurable. What is it configurable with? Like, how are we registering its configurable aspects? So that's another. Do we have, so basically we need to generate, probably generate a component, right? For that can follow along with this. Is that right?
One more thing that we may need to do is improve the docs of the jot manipulator filter. I think Pranav worked on that maybe.
Yeah, I don't think he. Yeah, he should be pushed to. I don't know if he will.
Yeah, I'll look after it. I mean, I'll try to push him, and if he doesn't, I take a look at documenting it.
Thanks, Rudraksh.
All right.
I think we covered every topic. So let's meet up next week and follow up on these items. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you,
See you
Devendu.
soon.
Bye all. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye all.